For more on China-U.S. trade talks, I'm joined by Charles Hankla in Atlanta. He's an associate professor at Georgia State University. Sir, welcome to our show. I want to begin by asking you about this round of talks. You know, some media are editorializing the deal. They're talking about who gives in more, what's being agreed upon, what's not being agreed upon. First of all, your perspective on the deals that were reached.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much. I think at the moment it's quite difficult to assess this particular deal. As you know, just a few days ago, the U.S. government released a statement saying that China was agreeing to import $200 billion of additional American goods and services. And then the Chinese government denied that, and now, you know, with the official statement released by both governments, we have a statement that China is committed to importing more U.S. goods and services, but the exact number was conspicuously absent. And so I think that that's an indicator that both sides are willing to make a deal here in trade. And I think that we can be optimistic that at least any trade war is on pause. But nevertheless, I think it's fairly clear that the details have yet to be worked out.
Well, let's talk about specific demands. The U.S. side has been demanding better protection of intellectual property, and they want to sell more products and services to China. And of course, as you mentioned, they want a cut of $200 billion worth of trade deficit with China. How are those specific concerns addressed?
Well, I think, number one, if a $200 billion number does wind up being agreed on, I think it's going to be quite difficult to have follow-through on that number for a couple of reasons. First, just has to do with the productive capacity of the U.S. economy. You know, as you know, the U.S. economy is at full productivity at the moment, and so it'd be very difficult for the U.S. to actually generate enough goods and services to export $200 billion more to China over the next few years. Right now, the trade deficit with China in goods and services is about $325 billion. So we're talking about well over half of the trade deficit being changed. So there's that issue. And then a second issue has to do with international trade agreements under the WTO. So if China were to use government procurement to purchase more American goods and services, that could actually be a violation of international trade law and could invite lawsuits in the dispute settlement body of the WTO by the European Union, Japan, and other countries. And if, in fact, China is suggesting that it would lower tariff barriers and other sorts of barriers to encourage more American imports, then under international trade law, it would actually have to do the same for all other members of the WTO under most favored nation. And so it would be very difficult to predict how much more American goods specifically would be imported into China vis-a-vis other products. So I think there's still a lot on that front to be worked out.
Sure. Talking about exports, U.S. exports to China, that leads to my next question, which is the Chinese demand, which included high-tech export to the U.S. There has been this, export ban originating from the Cold War era. Also, there are talks about investment review treaties, more security reviews on Chinese investment coming here to the United States. How are those Chinese concerns being addressed?
Well, yes. I mean, I think if any sort of deal is worked out, once we hear the specifics, it might wind up being of China sort of giving in on U.S. demands to close the trade deficit, and the U.S., on the other hand, backing off of some of these export constraints that are national security related. It might also be that the U.S. reduces its demands for changes in Chinese domestic investment through its industrial policy and other demands. But this is going to be tricky for the Trump administration because already Republicans in Congress are talking about new legislation that might actually strengthen rather than relax the national security restrictions on certain technologies being exported to China and on Chinese investment in the U.S. So if this does wind up being part of the deal, in other words, closing the trade gap in exchange for more technology exports, then it's going to be something that President Trump might have some challenges selling to his own party.
Sure, from the Chinese side, that would look like killing two birds with one stone, but we'll see what happens. Thanks so much, Charles Hankla in Atlanta.
Thank you so much.